Welcome to MT Fridays. We're Melonya Johnson, owner of BSMART Coaching, and Tahitia Timmons, owner of Conscious by Us. Together, we're here to fill your Fridays with unscripted conversations that cover the gambit: politics, current events, science, social justice, health and wellness, and more. We're here to elevate the conversation. We're fighting the brain drain, one unscripted conversation at a time. So grab your coffee, tune in, and let's dive into another episode of MT Friday.
Hello.
Hello. Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy
Yay.
Friday. Well,
Oh my gosh. Who's been having a week? I just I feel like the run up to I know like maybe people aren't supposed to talk politics this close to the election. But I will say we didn't even talk about this like pre, but like I can say this for myself, and maybe Melonya, we can agree to this. We won't talk politics in a like non-general, like
I can't agree to that. Whatever you're about to say, I can't agree to it.
You're like, we will only talk facts. How's that? We'll only talk facts. We'll only talk facts, or we'll talk our personal opinions.
Well, isn't that well?
We won't talk made up things.
Well, yeah, that's yeah. I hope
From
that
us.
I'm talking facts. Yeah, we've got less than a week to go before our Latino brothers and sisters are up in arms because of this comic that opened for the latest Trump his Madison Square Garden rally. And I feel some kind of way about this because how do I say, I forgot who the activist was. I think Rosie Perez is going, she's now starting to, maybe not now starting, but she is, campaigning for Harris. And then there was someone else, another Latino man. I can't remember his name, but he's got some clout, and he's going to uh, Florida to help the 500,000, Latino people there galvanize and get out the vote. And my first thought was like, well, damn, you sure did wait till the 12th hour, right? Now that somebody hurled an insult, to our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, right? Now you're up in arms, but was it okay when all the racist, dangerous rhetoric was focused on Black folks? Here's the
or immigrants from anywhere,
or
right? Like
immigrants.
Venezuelans,
It,
Mexicans,
and
like
that's the problem, man. Regardless of your color, regardless of your creed, when
or your
someone
sexuality or
or your
gender.
sexuality or your gender or whatever, when someone attacks one, we're all being attacked. And I thought that was I mean, damn it, what I don't understand what has to happen in order for people, and you'll see Black people, who are supporting Trump, and you'll see Latino people, and you'll see, and I'm not understanding, like, do you not understand that this party, the MAGA party, is not for you?
Yeah, but you know what? I think, and so I'm going to play devil's advocate throughout this to keep us like kind of like, in case
I'm
I'm
not.
not going
I'm not.
to, I'm going to try to. Um, and so I think it has to do with when you are in a group and you start to more identify with that group. So let's say you're like in a business owners group, and you start to forget that there's pieces that may impact you that are outside of business owners, right? So I can see how people start to step outside of maybe their cultural affiliations, their racial, gender, or whatever, and start to see themselves as more aligned with a particular group. But it is really, really hard when that alignment also overrides like the sense of self-protection, right? Because it's one thing if you're just talking about the economics, and I'm not going to say that economics aren't serious, because fiscal stuff will kill you, right? Like, we live in a capitalist democracy, we need money here. But to have that become the focus and the business piece, or you're a business owner and you don't see yourself as one of those people, ultimately you're still in that group. Like, I can't necessarily step outside of all of my cultural and gender and sexual identities. Like, just for the sake of, hey, I'm a business owner, maybe I did better tax wise under a conservative administration. That to me is not enough. Like, one singular issue to focus on, and that is what I hear Trumpers near me say. That, well, fiscally, economically, like the economic piece gets pushed a lot. And to me, that's not enough when it comes to the social issues that are going to be impacted. There's too many other pieces of my identity I think about. So I can see how some people have chosen to continue along a path that ignores the social piece of their identity. But I still think that that's wild that, you're able to just push that aside and not think about, like, the social impact for everybody around you. But I
Yeah.
agree with you on your stance on this. But I can kind of like get in the mindset of like why some people are continuing to stick with it. And then the other thing is, I think people hate to admit that they're wrong.
No, you know what? I don't. I think it's self-hatred. I honestly, I really do. I really do. I mean, I think that, I mean, because the president, the ex-president, former president, said, had someone that called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, right? You're up in arms. But where was the outrage when immigrants were being locked up in cages and housed in cages, and when children were separated from their parents? And I still don't know all of the the particulars in terms of if all of those children were actually returned to their families, right? Because they did such a terrible job in implementing, these folks that under the Trump administration, right? But where is the outrage for that? Where was that? Why was this the thing that galvanized people to run to but we watch people literally, I'm not making it up, and it's not hyperbole, in cages, right, being housed in these waiting bins or whatever that were actually cages, and children were taken. And so that, so the harm that has been done to the Latino community didn't just start with that comic statement. It has been demonstrated prior to him even running for president, right? And so, I think what are people like? Are they asleep? Are they not really paying attention? Are we so caught up in our world that we don't? I'm a politics junkie, so I'm always tuned in, right? And I have been since back in the day when I watched Walter Cronkite every evening while I was supposed to be doing my homework. Thank you, Dad. But
but but how long can people sustain a level of outrage and disgust, right? Like, because there's so much to get upset about. There's so much to, you know, to feel this sense of like, why aren't we doing anything, right? So there's so many issues, and like, how long can you sustain being keyed up? So I can understand, I can empathize a little bit with people feeling like they just can't, they can't bring the energy for it. They can't, because I've heard people say, this chronic, and I think even we had talked about this chronic, like, social media and politics, and constantly feeling like you're in this endless cycle of like, politics are happening, and like, there's these social issues we have to get behind. Like, it's really hard to always be in a sense of fight or flight, right? Like, what am I going to take? Like, yes, the fact that we saw people in cages and we weren't outraged is disturbing. However, I will say we are a penal system, and we are so used to seeing people in jails, in cages. We let's not think about the history of how, Black Americans were treated under slavery. We're used to seeing people chained and chain gangs, prisons. Like, we're desensitized to human suffering when it comes to imprisoning people. And we have this automatic thought that anybody who has been imprisoned or shackled is bad. Like, that those people are not political prisoners, that those people are not, being held not for bad reasons, but for policy reasons. And when I say policies, a document that they haven't done anything bad, what we would consider as most citizens a bad act, right? So, but we're so used to seeing people detained that, like, I think we're slightly desensitized to that. We have a very harsh penal system here. We're used to seeing prisoners like being.
But they weren't prisoners. Those people in those
No, but
cages.
what I'm saying is, the minute you put people in that type of like visual setup, I think there's a lot of citizens here that immediately think, oh, prison, those are bad people. Oh, they put them there because they're bad,
Well,
without
yeah.
even thinking
Well,
about,
then
like,
that makes
these
us
are not
kind of
bad
what?
people.
I mean, really, then we don't have critical thinking and we have no discernment. But here's the problem that I have. First of all, how long can you stay mad until you fix the problem? That's because do something. Don't stay mad and grumble to yourself. Do something. And so maybe a part of our do something is having these conversations on Friday, right? Whatever it is that you can do, whether it's talking to your children, whether it's volunteering in your community. But, what we can do on November 6th or 5th, what day is it? What day is election day? 5th? I don't want to give out the wrong.
Tuesday.
Huh?
Tuesday. I think Tuesday is the.
Yeah, let me
We're
just
giving
check.
out the wrong date here.
Yeah, I thought
I'm gonna say. I'm
we're
gonna say you're
supposed to be giving
absolutely.
out the truth,
Yeah,
right?
the
It
fifth.
is
The fifth.
Tuesday the 5th. So
Yeah.
on the 5th, while we cannot personally solve every problem on this planet, what we can do is vote for someone that has our best interests at heart and who has the bandwidth and the resources to address some of the problems that are important to us. Like I was thinking the other day, I did my podcast, and I touched on years ago when I was a practicing Buddhist, and that sect of Buddhism talked about your environment is a reflection of what is going on inside of you, right?
Mm.
And I use that particular example because I was talking about a particular time when my mental state was really being challenged, and I understood what was going on because I looked at my environment. And then today, as I was preparing for this, I thought about that same concept. Now, when we look at our world, it is a reflection of what is going on inside of us. And what a toxic place that is. I just saw in the Times this morning something that impacts actually you in the Northeast. The headline was "Rare Autumn Drought in Northeast Brings a
Oh,
Spate of Wildfires," and it made me
because
think.
it's hot
It is.
as the
Listen,
Dickens here.
listen to these statistics. In New Jersey, 377 wildfires have burned over 628 acres since September 15th, a jump from 26 wildfires, with only about 7 acres consumed over the same period last year. Connecticut, um, Connecticut, there have been 84 wildfires since October 21st, an increase from 5 over the same period in 2023, right? And then I thought about here and I'm in Buffalo, and this summer, we've had 2 tornadoes touch down. Statewide, there have been 30 tornadoes touch down in New York State. I think the average on any given year is like 5 or 7, right? So, and then we saw the unprecedented back-to-back hurricanes in Florida, right? And so I'm saying, and then just recently we saw the devastating um, uh, 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 floods in Spain. They had a year's worth of rain in one day. And so, if you are not voting for someone who actually recognizes that there is climate change and that it is detrimental to our well-being, future generations of well-being, and our planet, then you can't necessarily fight that fight by yourself, but you damn sure can put somebody in the White House who understands that climate change is real, right?
Well, and you said something interesting. So you said you can't not recognize that climate change is a thing, right? And so I also think it's people thinking, well, I want fixes now, right? And climate change is us really thinking about the future. And I don't know how well we do when it comes to future planning because we're very immediate here in the US. If it's not immediately going to impact me, it's almost like we're not properly preparing for the future generations that will come. It's almost as if we're very narcissistic when it comes to the planet. Like, because I've actively heard people, not recently, but say things like, well, I won't even be alive when that thing happens, or like, that's not going to impact me. Like climate change, oh, that's 100 years away. I probably won't still be alive. Or like, we're not going to see bad things for, oh, at least 100, 200 years. Well, it's a weird mentality to have when we also seem to be very longevity focused, right? So we want to live a long time. Like you hear about those with money doing everything they can to live a long time, yet you're not thinking about the planet that you're currently in. So, if I was a conspiracist, I would say like they want to live a long time. They realize they're burning up the planet and they're going to leave on spaceships, right? Like that's what conspiracists say. That's why maybe the rich haven't gotten behind the climate change issue, right? But I'm not a conspiracist. And I just think we're all very greedy and selfish in the moment without thinking that, yes, I can I can do this thing today and it's not going to impact me today, but eventually it is going to catch up with us. The same way that poor eating habits, right, eventually catch up to us. This is the same thing by not prioritizing the climate because, hey, I want gas now. I want cheap gas now. So I want more gas now. Okay. yes, that will make for cheaper gas and oil, right? Like that will make that industry cheaper if we can get more of it. But it's going to speed up the heat, the rainfall, and the U.S. often leads the way when we think about being more conscious with how we're using non-reusable energy, our limited resources. So I see it as a a reflection of a bigger issue in the US. We are very self-centered and we're very narcissistic. We're very only, well, this is good for me in this moment where I'm existing today. So whatever is my priority, that's what we care about. And I don't see us as future oriented, which is a sad way to be. I think it's also how we're seeing some of the polls play out. Like, well, I see that this is going to impact other people, but that's not me. And like, I think it's a very naive way to exist and be as a society, as a country and a society. And I'll put myself in that because uh, I do like when stuff is cheap without thinking about, well, why is it cheap?
Well, you know what? Now that brings up another good point. So this the Washington Post took some heat because the owner and I'm starting to get quite concerned about all these billionaires who are in control of our
Media
media.
or class,
You know
like
what I
they do
mean?
control
Yeah.
it.
You know what I'm saying? Because now you get to control the information, and and they have not always been focused on the ordinary people of the world, except to how to make more money from us. But that being said, so Jeff Bezos decided at the 12th hour not to endorse Kamala Harris, which was the intention of the post, and some of his staff have quit over that, and they have lost over 200,000 subscriptions to the Post because of that. They decided not to endorse anyone because of Bezos. That was so people left the Post. But I thought to myself, now how much of that protest is going to go to Amazon? How many of
Hmm.
us are going to say, "Okay, Jeff, okay,
And
I'm,
I,
I'm not going to buy it."
I don't know if I don't know if we talked about this or I talked about it with my mom or like I know I've talked about the Amazon piece, but like I honestly like I was like, oh, Amazon, yeah, and then I was like, oh, but I like Amazon, and like that would be like my Fire Stick, and like if you think about how enmeshed just like the general person is with individual billionaires companies, it is scary because like in theory I'm like, yeah, that's great, boycott that, don't do that thing. But then when it comes narcissistically, my self-centered piece, I'm like, but I like Amazon
Yeah,
Prime. I
yeah.
like some of their shows. They had a great show that I enjoyed. Like, oh, I would have to get rid of that. And then free shipping. And oh, I wouldn't be able to go on and be like, oh, I need that dog food. A 5% discount sounds great. Not even thinking about, okay, now it's being shipped and all the gas that's being used and all of that when I could take my butt down and pick up, support local business, do all those things. But I'm narcissistic and lazy, and I freely admit to that. However, I think there are small ways we can do this that don't necessarily um, uh, have us giving up these things, but it does send a message. Like protest days, right? Nobody shops at a certain organization to send a message like, hey, we do care about an issue, right? So, like, let's say if you like everybody protested a certain thing or didn't use a social media outlet, and this has been done before with certain success, those type of like grassroots things that don't necessarily have you giving up the product, but send a message to the owner of or the business piece of it that hey, people do care about social issues too. Um, Even if we're selfish in some of our caring. Um, but yeah, I did, and then I actually looked to see like when you give up Amazon and you just step away from that, what does that look like? And some people had said it had made them exercise more. They had gotten out more. They had visited local vendors more. Yes, it's more expensive, right? Because as a small vendor, you may charge more, but think about the money you're bringing back into the local community. Um, but it was interesting because, so to bring neutrality to what you said, he claimed, and it is true, that originally 30 years ago, the Post did not endorse anyone. And there was a time when newspapers did not endorse candidates. And I didn't get deep into the research on this, but I'm guessing that some of that probably has to do with McCarthyism and like coming out of that, and some of the other political machinations that were going on like 30, 40, 50 years ago, and trying to have like more neutrality. So
No,
should newspapers endorse candidates? I don't know if they should. But if you have a history of more than like 2 decades of this is your pattern, why would you stop? Would
well,
be my
that,
question.
well, yeah. Why would you stop? Why would you choose one of the most important elections in our lifetime? Quite frankly, to then do that. But I think he's probably trying to hedge his bets, because if Trump wins, then he doesn't want to be targeted. His business targeted by Trump, and he doesn't want his paper targeted by Trump. So at the hour when he should have been most courageous, he chose not to be. And I'll be honest with you, I had to, when I was like, oh, Bezos, the Washington, and then, Post, and I thought, well, I do get news alerts from them, but I don't have a subscription. But then I thought, oh, but yeah, Amazon. And quite honestly, I'm not proud of this, but I made the decision that, well, I can't take that fight to Amazon. I use Amazon too much, right? So I mean, just being
It's
honest.
it's
I mean,
it's it's enmeshed our lives now,
during the
and we are also very afraid of any other, because we've been socialized to be afraid of any other potential global vendor. Like, and I'm gonna
I'm
put this
really
out there.
afraid
I'm
of
not
that.
supporting any of these that I'm gonna say, but like things like Shein and Temu and there are other like cheap places to get things, not necessarily to the extent that Amazon has its fingers and reach in the US. But if you wanted to shop at other, because sometimes they source from those places, and there are other ways to do that. However, Amazon is a part of our, it's almost like,
Culture.
do you remember Ma Bell and like those big corporations years?
It's a
It
part of
feels
our
like that.
culture.
Yeah, it's
I
part of
mean,
our culture.
I made that decision back, and I was very aware and very disappointed with myself during the pandemic. The amount of times I ordered something from Amazon, right, while I was able to, work from home or whatever, knowing that these folks in the warehouse couldn't do that, right? But I still ordered, and not to say I didn't feel some measure of guilt about doing that, but I did. And when this situation came up, I was like, okay, you're going to boycott Amazon? And I was like, not today. Maybe I should. Maybe we should. If you do it, I'll do it. But can we
I
just do it
already
this
answered that.
day? I mean, can
I
we do it
said a
for a day?
day. I
Just a
said a
day.
day.
Just a
I said
day.
no.
Let them know.
No, but
Just
I
a
mean like
day.
pick a day and
Yeah.
boycott.
But I
It
don't
would
think
have to be an organized process.
and you
And
also
I
have to be somebody who, how many people don't even know that there's a Washington Post, right?
well, yeah, there's that too. Um, or that it's part of the Amazon conglomerate with Jeff Bezos owning it, being the primary investor. And so last week, you and I talked about how we would let these go for an hour because we're right before a political election, and we had so much to talk about. And we're almost at the half hour mark. So, are we doing an hour today, Melonya? I think we're doing an hour today.
Oh,
We have
okay.
more.
What do you want to talk about? Go ahead, Tisha. We'll talk.
Uh oh. You're like,
What are we talking about?
Oh my goodness, now the pressure's on me. So we talked about climate. We talked about the Washington Post thing. I want to talk a little bit about. So there was another thing that came out about women, right? So like there's a little blurb that's going around about women may not know what's good for them, that both candidates will protect the needs of women, but and I think the quote was, it's from Trump, and we're not, I don't want to say that. It's from Trump, and he says something like, I'm going to protect women whether they like it or not. And so there was some weigh in about that doesn't speak to the autonomy of women. And it got me thinking about gender roles, right? So, and oddly enough, height. Um, so in our society, there is this thought of men as being protective of women. So, is that where we still want to be? Like this big guy who comes in and he's like, I'm going to take care of you even if you don't know what you need because I know best, big, strong man, right? Um, and the reason why I was thinking about height is there is sometimes a thought around like guys that are 6 foot and taller, right? Like that they're like more masculine. And I know it's been said that Trump is like, he's a man's man. Like he's like 6 foot and like he's a man, like, you know, a man's man. So I'm going to throw that back to you. What do you think, Melonya, about all of that going on, that we're small little creatures that need protection? That really, who could protect us is a
Well, we have
big
to
burly
protect
man.
ourselves. Women have to protect themselves and understand this. Under patriarchal society, women have never been protected. They've never been safe. They've never been full citizens. They've never had a true autonomy and rights. They've never been considered equal. They've never been paid the same as their male counterparts. They have never been a fair distribution of work within the household. Women have not thrived under patriarchal societies. So let's get that straight right away. Who protects women? Women protect women. But women don't only protect women, women protect other people. Women protect society. Women protect the planet. Women are the true protectors, right? And so it is really quite fresh that a man who was found guilty of assaulting a woman and with a whole stack of other women but behind her is talking about protecting women. The same man who stacked the Supreme Court to reverse rights that protected women's health. How many women have unnecessarily died because they were not given procedures that would during birth, childbirth or post childbirth or before childbirth that saved their lives. So he is a lot of things, but a protector of women is not one of them. So let's just put that out there, okay? Yeah, and really, if we're going to vote for someone who actually understands women, right, and understands the needs of women, understands that that many women these days are the heads of households, right? We're talking about protector of what 50% of marriages end in divorce, and most of the time those children that are in that family stay with the woman. So women are really the protectors of families these days. They are raising the children, they are heading the households, and you want someone in there who understands that reality, as opposed to trying to take us back to some ideal of in the 1950s that never really served women in the first place. Women left the household because they weren't treated well. They didn't have powers. They were disenfranchised. So we're not trying to go back there.
And so that's where I kind of wanted us to like get to, that this statement is not the same as, when the other parties have said, like, we're going to try to look at protecting women's interests, whether that be, looking at healthcare, looking at childcare, looking at education, and to have someone say, even if they don't know kind of what's good for them, implies that we are children, right? So that's what I kind of heard when I heard that statement come out. But there was a piece that, similar to Days, and I know I've talked about this with other people, but when you think like, oh, it would be nice if someone just did everything for you, like you were a toddler. And I think that only sometimes about like, projects I join that I have to lead. And I think, man, why did I sign up for this? I wish somebody else was in charge of this. And we're forgetting the opportunity to make those choices, right? The women that have come before us have fought so hard so that we are allowed to even debate this in our heads. That we're allowed to even have conversations like you and I are having. And so I do think it is really important to I know the past week, a lot of people focused on the statements about the Latino community, but there also have been derisive statements brought out this past few days about women too. So let's not forget, this guy might not have the best interest of women in mind.
Mike?
Well, I'm trying to be neutral.
I'm not trying to be neutral. You can be neutral. I'm not trying to be neutral, because I think this time in our history, it defines us, and it's there's I don't have any space for neutrality. I have space for facts. But here's the thing: I'm looking at this quote, whether women like it or not. That sounds like force. Right? Yeah. And what woman ever wants to be forced to do anything? Well, apparently not the woman who sued you for sexual assault, right? Grab them by the, you can do that when you're rich, right? So he exudes the fact that he does not respect the barriers of women. No, what woman is asking him to protect them? But I'm going to do it. I'm going to protect them. Whether a woman likes it or not. Well, what the?
And see, it's a strange statement. It's a strange statement to make. Like, what does that mean? What does that involve? Right?
Well, what it means is that the president, the government is going to decide for you women what is right for you. He always tells you what he's going to do, right? If you think that the power grab is going to stop with a woman's right to choose, you're sadly mistaken.
Yeah. And so that's why I said, like, I think there's a couple of things we could talk about a little bit more.
You're trying to get my blood pressure up, aren't you?
Well,
I'm telling you, I am so of this election. I am just like so tired of. I'm tired of the United States. Okay, I am tired of. I'm tired of it. Now this is my country. I have had relatives who have served in the armed forces. I have every right to be here, and this is my country, and I love my country. I do. I mean, I have thought about moving to other places, and I'm like, wow, that's learning a new culture and learning new language, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I would like to live a good life in my own country. I'd like to live a good life in my country where I am respected as a human being, where I am as respected as a woman, when my rights as a human being are protected, when my rights to have a clean earth is protected. I want to live in a country that doesn't see me solely as a commodity to be bought and sold, my information to be bought and sold, to be preyed upon constantly without unrelenting onslaughts of ads that are trying to get me to buy or make me feel I'm inferior unless I own this, or unless I live there, unless I drive that. I want to live in a sound society and a decent culture. I mean, when Trump said, the Madison Square Garden was a love fest, I mean, someone referred to Kamala Harris as having pimp handlers. Well, that would make her a hoe, wouldn't it?
Well, and when you say pimp handlers,
I
that's
mean,
that's the language
and
derisive.
I'm being crass for a reason, but that was what was said about the current vice president of these United States. If you are a patriot,
Yeah, elections have not had the civility that they used to have in the past. I think people tend to like shift from, or at least this is my feelings, right? Um, there was a sort of conduct that we expected for debates or even for politics for our leaders. And I think as we go to, like, as we become more transparent and we become more comfortable with people saying things that they never used to say before, we've also gone to the other extreme where there seems to be very little civility for, and when and the polite society has kind of left the building. And I think we need to create, well, what does it look like to be, to express our opinions, but express them in a non-hurtful way. And I think he kind of like, or I think there's some, and I won't just say it's him. I think there's this new tone where we're trying to be edgy and we're trying to be like catch people's attention, and a lot of times it is very harmful the way that we've gotten used to talking about people and seeing those who have a lot of reach talk about people. Um, yeah. So that the Madison Square Garden, that garden event was it didn't surprise me the tone of it, but it's interesting that so the comedian is the one who makes those statements, and there's been some stuff from the Republican Party that, it was he's a comedian, right? But he was vetted, so you kind of knew what was going to be said. And if it was if it was the Democrats who had done the same, this would be in the news too. So either way, when you have someone on who is like they're embodying the spirit of what you're about for that night, when you have someone on like that, that's and you vetted what they're saying or you vetted them coming on, you endorse those kinds of statements. So if the same thing had happened with the Democrat Party and they had brought on someone who is very controversial in their comedy, we would be talking about that too. So I want to be fair in the sense that, like, either way, if either party had done something similar, it would be out there. And I think there is something right now out about Biden where he implies that Trump's followers, I think in the White House, they document everything, that he implied that they were like garbage or something like that. It has to do with an apostrophe. It's not as blatant, but both candidates, both political parties are under scrutiny. And I also just want to talk a little bit about the fact we focus a lot on the presidential piece of it without thinking about, yes, no matter who wins, depending on how House and Senate turn out, like the trifecta, right? Neither one of them may have the power to get anything done.
well, Trump
And
will
so,
if he has it, and it's a Republican, Congress. He'll get everything. He's not a Republican, if it's not a full Democratic Congress, then you know, it's gonna be difficult for either party.
it's gonna
No,
so
well, no,
and that's
I think it will be less difficult for Trump because he's a rule breaker. So he would find a way to get things done. Regardless of what he would turn really the democracy on its head and do really what he wanted to. He would make a decree that whatever he says goes, and that would be it. And Congress could it'd be very not that I'm hoping for it, but it would be very interesting to see all of those people that supported him, and even though they hated supporting him, right, they knew that it was wrong, that then be cast aside as he becomes King Trump, because that's exactly what he'll do. That's exactly what he'll do.
And so I hate to say that I want to just highlight that for some in the US, what you just said, that sounds like, oh my goodness, this is going to be the worst thing. And so when they hear that coming from certain groups, they're like, but he was president in 2016, and all of the things that, everybody said he was going to be terrible, and all these bad things, that didn't happen. So
Well, he did
like,
take away our rights as women. That did happen.
but that happened through his positioning with the courts. And
Right,
so
but that
I don't
happened.
think that people directly correlate that,
I don't know why they do.
except when he talks about it as like, I helped to get
And
this done.
he did deny
He
a
did
fair
help to get
election.
that done.
He did
Yeah.
deny a fair election. He did try to stop the proceedings of a fair election and steal millions of votes from Americans. That I don't understand where the disconnect is.
But what I caution us with is that oftentimes those who are naysayers to how bad it will be will point to, well, it wasn't that bad then. But let me finish. What I will say is, to those people, he is in a different position this time around. He is better positioned when it comes to the Supreme Court. He's better positioned when it comes to how many people, when it comes to the Senate and the Congress. Like, he's just in a better position to move major policies and laws forward than he was then. And I think that's why we have to really be listening to, hey, this could be a different scenario. All of the people leaning into, well, we made it the 4 years. All of the people saying like we were going to blow up, that didn't happen. It's a different time period. And don't rely on your beliefs about those 4 years, because he's much better positioned to get stuff done. But even if let's say he doesn't win, I still think it's going to be chaotic, because there's going to be a lot of the election was stolen. And I don't 100% know if she is going to have the trifecta to do the things that she wants to do, which then would impact. So when I said future, like leaning, right? So since we're not future leaning, we're not even thinking about the fact if she can't get stuff done, she won't have a second term. Because immediately people will say, well, she didn't do anything. She couldn't do any of her promises. If she doesn't sweep, right, for the 3, she might not be able to do anything. It might be sort of a deadlock of not getting worse.
Well,
So,
let's go back to the position that he's in now. See, when he first went into office, he didn't have a plan. He didn't even know that the Obama administration was going to leave, and that he had to have people in place to do certain things. He didn't know, but he does have a plan now. It's called Project 2025, and it is a very detailed agenda of what.
Well, I said we wouldn't say untruths. That's not his. It comes from the Heritage Foundation. So
yes, but
the plan
his vice president did write the forward for it, and many of his cabinet members are a part of this. So yes, there is a blueprint out there for him. Okay, did he write it? No, he's not that smart. But there is a.
I think he's smart as he.
I think he's maniacal. I think that's his genius. I think that he's an evil human. I think that he's an evil human. That's me. That's not you. I
I
think
think
that's where his genius is, right? I think that
I,
he's a
I will
maniacal.
never deny that he is smart and savvy in the way that narcissists who want to keep their control are smart and savvy, and that is a powerful place to be. There were some moments though when I thought, I wonder if he really wants to get reelected with some of the stuff that went on this past week. Because sometimes he looks bored. Sometimes, like statements are made that you think like, oh, well, maybe this is going to polarize people a certain way, and it doesn't. So he like I've honestly thought like some of the things that were said would have resonated with different people differently. But I also think, and so I'll tell a little story. But years ago, when I was in high school, there was a bully who relentlessly bullied me around the color of my skin, my Brillo hair, and it was high school. And I remember there was this moment, like maybe senior year or junior year, where he said something and then leaned into the rest of the hockey team, like the hockey players, because we were in this, like I swam and they were played hockey and he played football and maybe he played hockey. I don't know. And they didn't back him. They didn't back him at all. They were like, we don't even know what you're talking about. Like, that's racist. And this was like back in like the early 90s. And what's weird is I don't remember the name of that kid, but he made my life awful. What I remember is the name of the white allies I discovered I had that were guys who defended me, guys I didn't think would defend me, and I feel tearful. But my hope is that those guys will vote with their hearts as allies to the women that, to the women and those who are marginalized who they work with and see every day. Because I remember it was like, what are you talking about? Like, Tahisha's our friend. Like, you're racist. And like, we don't think like that. Like, we don't, like, we're not backing that. And I hope that's what bubbles up secretly on the fest. And I remember those guys' names, and I don't remember his name, even though he tortured me. What the biggest impact was that moment. And I hope we all have that moment on November 5th, even though I'm pretty sure it's going to be chaos no matter how it goes. But I wanted to share that because I remember those guys' names, Robbie and Michael. To this day, I'm not going to say their last names because, privacy, but I remember them. And there was another kid, Stan, that I remember too. But it was shocking because I didn't think it was going to happen. And I went to a primarily white school because we had moved from Patterson to Clifton, and it was known as the white elephant in that little area. It was surrounded by two very urban, it was the last, and like I went there at a time period where people in the town were complaining about all of these. They'd had an influx because one of the Catholic schools high schools had closed, and another high school had closed because of funding. And all of a sudden, there were brown and black people coming into their high school that had gone other places. And so I went at a very sort of tumultuous time. And I really thought that nobody was going to stick up for me. Like, I was a weird kid. I was openly gay, which was something you were not back then. I was, black. I showed up with listening to punk music. I was everything that was an outlier. And so I think we have more allies than we think.
I hope so. I really do. In fact, that was a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. I do hope that we have more allies. I really do. I hope that I think I don't know if men understand on a very deep level how devastating it is for women to not have full rights of their own bodies. That is, it is quite it is quite devastating to not have full rights over your body, not to be able to make health decisions for your own body. There was this woman who was pregnant. She had complications. They could not remove the baby, uh, the fetus, because, and I think it was in Texas, the heart has to stop. So the doctors did not do anything, and and left the child within her, and it ended up being a day or two. And finally, by the time they did something, infection took place and she died. She was a mother. She was a mother. She had a 2-year-old child that now is an orphan. I mean, no one has the right to tell. And again, being from African American heritage, when we go back in our lineage, we can only go so far because of slavery, right? Coming from that type of lineage, I understand on a visceral level this concept of not owning your body. That in a civilized society should never happen. And for women who hold almost 50% of the world population, we should not be living under those circumstances. So, this is not, I'm all for a great economy, but let's also put things into perspective. After that pandemic, the entire world faced inflation. It was not just something that was, just isolated in the United States. In fact, our economy has done better than other economies post the pandemic, right? Things that are real when you start, and see, if you listen to advertisements will always tell you that something is wrong. In today's economy, and with our slumping economy, you should buy this or you should do this. I pay attention to ads and I listen to the messages that they're sending, and they're always sending that our economy is not strong and things are not strong, but realistically, our unemployment rate is at 4% or less, right? The lowest that it's been in history. There's not a lot of people that don't have jobs now, right? Our inflation pricing is almost pre inflation, right? I mean, these are some of the realities, but we're being fed information that isn't true, and we're up, that always hyped up, right?
And that's the thing I was talking about. Like when you were like, we have to stay mad, right? But then there's all these things also layering on, and there's misinformation, right, about the economy. So how do you keep that? How do you sort through all that? How do you not just feel overwhelmed? And for those who feel overwhelmed, there's almost this apathy that kicks in. Like it's so bad. Like there's nothing I can do. Like there's so many bad things for both sides. I think there's this feeling of like, there's nothing I can do, but there's something we can do. We can choose to vote for for those who will harm us the least. You mentioned something. I don't think we're going to get time to it because we're almost at the end. But you mentioned slavery and our votes, right? So one of the things that people talk about a lot is the Electoral College, and the Electoral College exists because of slavery. For those that don't know it, states that had that had slaves got an extra bonus for having slaves. So the idea of not getting rid of the Electoral College because it would unfairly weight certain areas, I would propose something different. I was thinking about it the other night. Like if you have more marginalized people, like minority groups, if you have more women, if you have more Black people, if you have more Latinos, I don't know, queer people, like why don't we just give For every one of those, you get an extra, whatever the electoral college was giving you. So that then it's really fair. And that's reparations for all the years that we suffered. So like that would be an incentive to be like, hey, come move to my state and I won't just feel like the weight of your vote, but now you have to come here and you might actually be voting a certain way. I'm sure they wouldn't want to do that because then it would be like, hey, like we want to be friendly to these groups of people because we got more votes versus like, hey, we're just getting them from some old law. But yeah.
Yeah. I still want my 40 acres and a mule. Okay. I still want my.
Well, now 40 acres and a mule would be worth quite a bit with housing. Yeah. We didn't even talk about housing. Yeah. But I'm gonna close this out. We loved everyone who jumped in and joined us. The few that did watch. But thank you so much for joining us and see us next week. I'm closing out the show.
Thanks for joining us on MT Fridays. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more insightful discussions every Friday. Remember, the brain drain stops here, so keep the conversation going by connecting with us on social media or visiting our website. Until next time, stay curious and keep filling your mind with knowledge. See you next week, Friday, on MT Fridays.